T.S. Eliot. I mean, the name is huge, right? He's this absolute giant of literature, a Nobel Prize winner, the guy who gave us The Wasteland. But what if I told you that his most influential work wasn't even a poem? What if it was a set of rules? Rules that basically blew up everything people thought they knew about writing.
Just let that sink in for a second. This one idea is the heart of everything for him, and it is pretty shocking. It's like everything you've ever been taught about art being this deeply personal thing, this form of self-expression. Eliot comes along and says, nope, you've got it completely backwards. He argues that great art isn't about finding yourself, it's about escaping yourself. It's a wild concept, and we're going to break it all down.
You see, you've got to remember what was happening before Eliot came on the scene. Poetry was all about the romantics. Poets basically spilling their guts out on the page. But Eliot, he grew up in the shadow of World War I, a time when the whole world felt like it had been shattered into a million pieces. His poetry, especially something like The Wasteland, reflects that messy, broken reality. So for him, poetry couldn't just be about feelings anymore. It had to be something else, a disciplined, almost scientific craft.
So, okay, how do you even start to build that craft? Well, for Eliot, it all begins with his first, and maybe his most misunderstood rule for any writer who wants to be taken seriously. And it's this: embrace tradition.
But hold on, when you hear tradition, you're probably thinking of dusty old books and just copying what came before, right? That is not what Eliot meant. Not at all. For him, tradition is this living, breathing thing. It's a dynamic conversation happening across centuries, and you don't just get it for free. You have to earn your spot at the table through what he called great labor.
This great labor he talks about, it's all about developing something he called the historical sense. It sounds kind of fancy, but what it really means is learning to see the past in two ways at the exact same time. First, you have to get the pastness of the past, understanding that Homer was a product of his time, ancient Greece. But at the same time, you have to feel its presence, the fact that Homer's work is still alive, still talking to us right now. It all exists together. To make this feel a little less abstract, think about figures like Ram or Krishna in Indian culture. They are ancient, historical figures for sure, but they are also living, breathing presences in modern life. That's the historical sense in action.
Eliot had this brilliant way of explaining this. Think of it like this. Imagine all of the great works of art in history are like a perfect set of monuments in a museum. Now, when a truly new, genuinely original work of art shows up, it doesn't just get tacked on at the end of the hall. No way. To make room for it, the entire collection has to subtly shift and readjust. The relationships between all the old monuments actually change. So get this, a new work doesn't just join tradition, it actually changes how we see the past. The present literally alters the past. How cool is that?
And this idea, it flows right into his second rule, which honestly is even more radical. If the first rule is all about connecting with everyone who came before you, the second rule is about disconnecting from yourself. He called it the theory of impersonality.
Okay, so this puts him on a direct collision course with the Romantics. You've got William Wordsworth, who famously said poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And then Eliot comes in with the total opposite. For him, poetry was not about overflowing with your feelings, it was about controlling them, refining them, and in the end, escaping from them altogether.
He put it in this really memorable way. He said the artist's job is to create a separation between the man who suffers, that's the real person with all their messy emotions and baggage, and the mind which creates, which is the cool, detached artist making the work. And he believed the more perfect the artist, the bigger that separation.
I know this sounds super abstract. So how do you actually do that? Well, Eliot, being the brainiac he was, turned to science to explain it. He compared the poet's mind to a catalyst in a chemical reaction, specifically a tiny shred of platinum.
All right, so let's break down this little chemistry experiment. The reactants, those are the poet's own emotions, their memories, their personal experiences. Then you introduce the catalyst. That's the poet's mind. The mind is what allows all those feelings and experiences to react and combine in new ways to create something totally different, the poem.
And here is the absolute most crucial part of the whole analogy. That little piece of platinum is essential for the reaction to even happen, but it comes out the other side completely unchanged. It doesn't become part of the final product. And that's how the poet's mind is supposed to work. It's a neutral medium that helps create the poem, but it shouldn't leave any traces of its own personality behind. The art is separate from the artist, period. The ripple effect of this idea is just massive. I mean, think about it. If he's right, it means when we judge a piece of art, we shouldn't be digging into the author's biography or their personal drama.
We should look at the work itself. Judge the poet, not the poet. This was a game changer. It basically laid the groundwork for decades of literary theory and this idea we now call the death of the author.
So there you have it, Eliot's powerful, totally revolutionary rulebook for writing. But, as you can probably guess, not everyone was on board with these ideas. They're still intensely debated to this day, which brings us to his very complicated legacy.
Which leads us to the big question people have been fighting over for 100 years now. Was this new way of looking at literature a masterpiece of critical thinking, or was it a huge mistake?
I mean, the arguments on both sides are really strong. On the one hand, his influence is just undeniable. He's the guy who shifted our focus to the text itself and redefined the artist as a craftsman. But the criticisms are pretty serious. First, the big one. His tradition is, well, it's really focused on white, male, European writers. His whole demand for great labor can feel elitist, like only academics can be real poets. Some people argue his ideas are actually stifling, that they create this anxiety of influence that paralyzes young writers. And maybe the biggest knock against him is that he didn't even seem to follow his own rules. His own poetry, especially The Wasteland, feels so deeply, painfully personal. It seems to contradict his whole theory.
And yet, despite all of this, all these very valid criticisms, the world couldn't ignore his impact. In 1948, T.S. Eliot was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for being a trailblazer, a pioneer who changed poetry forever.
So at the end of the day, maybe this is the best way to think about him. T.S. Eliot is the bridge. He connects that old world of the emotional, romantic genius to the new world of modernism, which was all about structure, intellect, and craft. You can love him, you can hate him, but you absolutely cannot tell the story of modern literature without him.
And that leaves us right back where we started, with the very question Eliot forced us all to confront. It's a question that every artist, and really every person who loves art, still has to answer for themselves. Is the whole point of art to express who you are, or is its highest purpose to create something so powerful that allows everyone, including you, to escape from the self entirety?